Hello, and welcome to the Moms Love Coaching Podcast, where we talk about self-care from the inside out for moms. I'm your host, Carrie McFarland, along with Angie Turgeon-Ledoux. We are certified life coaches and moms, and in this podcast, we'll go beyond the take a spa day advice and talk about real and sustainable ways that you can feel better, be happier, and stay out of overwhelm and burnout. You spend your life taking care of everyone else. In this podcast, each week, it's all about you taking care of you with no guilt and no apologies. We're so happy that you've decided to spend this time with us, so go ahead and grab your favorite cup of coffee, find a comfortable place, and get ready to spend the next 30 minutes focusing on the most important person in your life, you. Welcome, everybody. Moms Love Coaching, self-care from the inside out. I'm Carrie McFarland with Angie Turgeon-Ledoux. Hello, Angie.
Hello, Carrie McFarland. How are you today? I was going to sort of a British accent when Marco Polo, Carrie. And if you don't know what Marco Polo is, you all ought to check it out. It is video texting.
Yes, right? We use it all the time.
Yep,
we ramble on while we're driving. We listen to it at our leisure. It's fun. Not everybody likes it, though. Not everybody likes to be videoed, but I'm used to it now, so it doesn't bother me. So today's topic, it's actually interesting because, so this is continuing our series of feelings that keep you stuck. Last week, we talked about confusion. The year before that, the week before that. I'm jumping way back. The week before that, we talked about fear. Today, we are talking about being unhappy. And it's kind of interesting because I have had a bout of being unhappy for various reasons, but being frustrated with my goals, not going where, not completing my goals, not being where I think I should be, right? Which is a thought and a judgment all at once, but feeling like I'm not where I should be and making up all sorts of stories about that in my head and then being unhappy about it. So obviously unhappiness is very common. Now, I just want to clarify that we're not talking about depression. We're not talking about clinical depression. We are talking about the general unhappiness that people feel in their lives for different reasons, situational, short-term, not the debilitating diagnosis of chronic depression. So that's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about general unhappiness. We were certified at the Life Coach School, and the Life Coach School teaches the model. And the model says that there are circumstances in our lives that we cannot control. And then we have thoughts about that. And then we have feelings from those thoughts. So unhappy is a feeling. And so it's easy to think that whatever is happening in your life is causing you the unhappiness. But really what's causing your unhappiness is the thought that you're having about that thing, the thought that you're having about that circumstance. That is what's causing your unhappiness. From there, you take certain actions that may perpetuate your unhappiness because you act in a certain way based on how you feel. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but we're really just talking about the feelings and, the different characteristics that are attached to unhappiness and how they can keep you stuck. One of the things that I want to emphasize, and I think a lot of people know this, but it's worth mentioning, that unhappiness is contagious. And I think most people know this when they're with somebody who's unhappy all the time. Not if somebody's unhappy because, again, a short-term situational thing, right? But if somebody is unhappy about everything, even if it's all different things, and they're complaining all the time and bringing that energy with them, you start to kind of pick up on that. And then you start to feel unhappy, at least when you're around them. It's important to know that not only can somebody spread unhappiness, but you can absorb that unhappiness as well. So if you are feeling unhappy say around a certain person, like you're noticing that you just don't feel really good when you're with this person, and you just, everything just seems to go wrong when you're with this person. They talk and you're like, yeah, it really is like that, and that's terrible, and you kind of jump in the pool with them. It could be that you're just kind of absorbing their unhappiness and that you're not really unhappy unless you're around them. Does that happen to you, Angie?
Yeah, it does. As you were talking, I was thinking about a work situation that I had. I was quite a bit younger. It was many, many years ago. And this person that I worked with was not in a great place in her life. And so therefore, there was a lot of unhappiness, a lot of drama, a lot of mountains out of molehills, and just, this constant negativity that when she finally did move on to something that was better suited for her. But I noticed that once I was away from that energy, suddenly my outlook improved because I did not realize, as a person who is very empathetic, I can absorb a lot of that negative energy and make it mine. It certainly was contagious, and I certainly felt it. And then after, I didn't realize what was happening in the moment, and I learned a lot from that because then I could recognize it better. You allow into your body and like into your own way of thinking is it's a skill set. Learning how to do that, how to keep yourself sort of compartmentalize it. You can be empathetic, you can listen to a friend, but not take it on yourself. And that's sort of what I had to learn how to do. And I'm not good at it yet.
Well, there's a reason for that, though. There's a reason that people want to jump in the pool, like not just empathize, but really, get in people's shoes and really kind of commiserate about it, is because it's connecting, and people want to connect with each other. Right. It's very connecting. I mean, think about the gossip, like, oh, tell me everything,
Yes. Exactly.
And somebody's like, oh, guess what happened? And you're like, what happened? Right. And it's going to be something bad, which means it's something interesting. It's just that if somebody does that, and that, that's fun, once in a while, but if it happens every time, like you said, the workplace, like, that person that constantly comes to you, like you see them coming and you're like, oh God, here they go. What are they going to have today?
That's right.
And people start avoiding them, which is actually, another element of being unhappy is social isolation. And part of that is that sometimes people kind of withdraw themselves from people, but sometimes people withdraw themselves from the person because of their attitude and their negative energy and the things that they do. And it's kind of a fine line. It's like, yeah, we do connect over negative things. I mean, that's why the news is the way that it is, with everything's negative in the news, right? I mean, think about it. When you hear a news story that's like positive, right? I mean, I do it too. You see a news story about like a fire or something, and you're like riveted. Like, what happened? Where did the people go? And how did that happen? Right? You're all interested. And the next news story is like, oh, somebody adopted a puppy from a shelter. And you're like, why is that news? Why?
Yeah, why do that balance? Like, I like to watch the lead up to the Super Bowl all day long, and they do these, like, it's not rags to riches, but from hard circumstances to positive circumstances. Like, how people have overcome, and these professional athletes and their families and the challenges they've overcome in their life. But it always starts with that, that really hard thing that you're like, I cannot believe they've achieved this level of what is success in our country anyway, right? Being a professional athlete and making it to the Super Bowl. And they tell these stories, and then, they always end up making you cry because you're like, boo-hoo, it's so terrible their life. And then they, we're riveted, definitely attracted to that story of human hardship and want to jump in the pool with people. And
Another characteristic, and touched on this a little bit, about unhappiness is just complaining, right? About everything. And I know I go through bouts of this where I complain. Angie can tell you because she hears all the polos.
I do.
And it's just like, and then this went wrong, and this went wrong.
It's the best. It's the best Carrie rant, we call it. So it's
again, it's like a fine line. It's like there's a fine line between venting and then just being like that all the time, right? There's a mindset, and then there's I just need to get it out and then I'm going to move on, right? There's a difference. And when you're stuck in that pessimistic, critical, complaining, worrying, like all of those things, when you're stuck in there, it's just it's demotivating. Being unhappy and all the things that go with it, it's just, it zaps your energy. It's hard to concentrate. It's, another symptom is like you're procrastinating all the time. And that's not the only reason we procrastinate, but it could be part of this whole cycle of unhappiness. And all those things kind of work together. It's cyclical, right? Because it's like you feel unhappy, you start complaining, and then if you have your bestie, they're going to agree with you. And you're like, yeah, it is really bad, right? So then you're totally demotivated. When you feel like that, you're just like, ugh, I don't want to do anything. So you just have no energy to do anything. And so what happens? Like, you don't do anything. It's easier to complain. You're going to start doing what's easiest, and it's easiest to complain and then do nothing about it. And you're just going to perpetuate your belief system that everything has gone wrong and everything is terrible and there's nothing you can do about it. And it just keeps you in that unhappy cycle. And it's hard to get out of. It's hard to move on from that when you're really kind of mired in there.
I work in a system that negativity can go wild, right? And that it's like wildfire spread throughout a building. It can really impact the culture. And if you're a typically positive person, like if you say, okay, like I'm typically an upbeat person, and I find myself, complaining a lot, and I find myself just seeing the bad in everything, and being the, the why bother person. Why am I bothering? That attitude, it is the hardest thing sometimes, the hardest thing to say, all right, time out, stop that, stop this, because we're taught that life is 50-50. Life, it averages out. And you might be going through a cycle right now where maybe everything just seems terrible. And it's when you choose, it's that what we're talking about is that ability, to see what you're doing, how you're choosing to think and talk and respond to those circumstances, and then what you're going to do about it. What's your action? What's the action that you're going to take from a mindful, self-compassionate place? Or you can stay stuck in that pool of misery and unhappiness. And
I mean, what you described in your workplace with the negative atmosphere, and then you start taking that on and start feeling like everything is going wrong, right? That is a perfect example of it being contagious. Even the most upbeat, happy person, if they are thrown in an environment where everybody is negative and everybody is unhappy, or a lot of people are unhappy, you can't help but start to absorb that. And again, that goes back to us as humans wanting to be part of a group, right? Because that is what our survival is. So when you're at work, that's your group. So, you tend to either rise or fall based on the group that you're with. And that is directly related to that instinct that we have to make sure that we are part of a tribe, part of a group, part of a system that is going to help us succeed. The reason that it's so, you had said you have to sometimes be like, okay, time out. Like things aren't that bad, and kind of redirect people. The reason that's so hard is because you are now separating yourself from the group, and you are calling yourself out as somebody who doesn't think the same way they do. So you're basically separating yourself from the group, which in your brain's primitive space is telling you that, you need to be part of this group or you're going to die. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
so that's because it sounds so ridiculous, but it's true. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, that's why you feel like when, they talk about mob mentality, things that you wouldn't do otherwise. But these people get caught up in this mob mentality and start doing things that they never would have done. That is why, on the very basic level, that's why it's so easy for people to get caught up in that, because it is just your instinct as a human to go along with the group. That's why it's hard to public speak, because you're putting yourself out there. That's why it's hard to be a leader, because again, you're putting yourself out there. You're kind of separating yourself from the group. Anything that separates you from the group on purpose, well, even if it's not on purpose, but if you're doing it yourself, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Right. And so you tend to just kind of follow what everybody else is doing. But if you have goals and aspirations and, you want to be a certain way and feel a certain way, sometimes you have to do that. One of the things, another characteristic of unhappy people is just the lack of gratitude and just always seeing the negative in everything, and not, you're focused on what you don't have instead of what you do, which actually goes into the next thing, which is not taking responsibility and blaming everything on everybody else, right? Kind of staying in that victim mode. That is another thing that unhappy people tend to do is, not only is everything going wrong, but there's nothing I can do about it. Right now, economic times are not the greatest. A lot of people are struggling with money. A lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck. And so that's real. That's not made up in people's head. But the way that you think about that can make all the difference. So you can think that everything is terrible, never have enough money, you could be homeless any day. I mean, right? There's lots of things that you could think that could make the situation even worse. There's also ways you can think to either keep you feeling either neutral or slightly positive about it, or maybe even super positive about it. Like, yeah, this is the lowest I'm ever going to be. And here are the steps I'm going to take to make sure that this never happens again. I mean, you could go all the way to that if you wanted to. It is in how you think about it. It's 100% in how you think about it. And I don't want to give the impression that it's super easy to go from everything is terrible to everything is great. That's kind of a big leap, but there are steps you can take in terms of your thoughts to gradually at least get to the place where you're not feeling unhappy. Maybe you're not feeling super positive, but you're not feeling hopeless or desperate, or, you're just feeling like, okay, it is what it is at this point,
I have a friend who has been on a journey for the last several years. And it's really interesting to look back on where she started the journey in a place of extreme unhappiness and discontent with her life. And what I'm noticing more recently is how some of the circumstances in her life have not changed. Some circumstances that she's not particularly happy about. But what she has learned how to do, to look at how far she's come, to look at the growth she's made, to see and appreciate how when she's confronted with a difficult situation, how she manages it in a way that she wouldn't have managed it 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 7 years ago, etc. And being able to say, I am like not really super happy overall with that I haven't done this XYZ, but or that my life is this way. But being able to see where she has, being able to see for herself where she has grown, where she has made changes and applied what she's learned, and taking pride in that. That is one of those skills that can really help you get that balance between, I can be in a situation that's not really where I would choose to be, or I can be in a circumstance that I wouldn't choose for myself, but I can still be happy in the small decisions I make from day to day. And if you're not happy with how you're showing up, that's a small change, that when you take responsibility for how you're showing up, that can make the world of difference between a life where you're just kind of passively watching it happen to you, and where you are embracing it and trying to move forward and always seek the things in life that you want. And what are you bringing that you can control, and stepping into that part of yourself that says, okay, I can think about this differently. I could do it this way. I could go talk to somebody. I could find a different way of living in a situation, or living with us in a specific circumstance.
Your feelings lead to your actions. So if you're feeling a certain way, you're going to act a certain way, right? So, if you're feeling down and unhappy and nothing is, you're thinking nothing is going right, and all that swirl in your head, right? You're going to act a certain way. You're going to, you're not going to have the energy. You're probably not going to try new things. You might be neglecting your own self-care, and even in terms of just like grooming, right? I mean, how many times have you woken up and feeling like, ugh, I don't want to do anything today, and then you don't end up taking a shower, and you just put your sweatpants on, and you just feel bleh all day, and you just don't do anything. Part of that is because your actions are perpetuating that feeling, because you have actions which create results for you, which then become your circumstance, and then you have thoughts about that result, right? So say you wake up and you're like, oh, I don't want to do anything, and you wear your sweatpants. I mean, nothing's wrong with sweatpants, people. I wear sweatpants too, but
and there's nothing wrong with a day to just do nothing and be like miserable. I call it, I'm not fit for human consumption day.
Yes, exactly.
It's on those days when you just want to not engage the world. There's a difference between just feeling it, letting it be there, and being stuck in it.
Yes.
And we've been talking a lot about the behaviors that show up that are hints to you that you might be stuck in it. You think the feeling is the thing that you have no control over.
All right. I'm just going to call it out. So we had to pause this podcast because my daughter came in and had to tell me something. And so we can't remember exactly what we were saying. Before
she
that,
talked a while. In our defense, it wasn't just like 10, 15 seconds. It was a good minute or two.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it was. Yeah. So
that just goes to
exactly what we were talking about has flown out of my head. But I know that we were talking about actions, and how your actions lead to your results, right? And so if you are feeling a certain way, then you are going to act a certain way. I mean, it's basically as simple as that. So,
That's right.
you know, when you are blaming everything on everybody else and you are feeling like a victim of your circumstances and you feel hopeless, then you're going to do things that perpetuate that hopelessness, right? So, like not taking care of yourself. I know that I was talking about sweatpants before, and that's just an example. But again, I love sweatpants. I wear them all the time. But it's the mindset that you have when you're doing it, right? Are you doing it because you want to feel comfy and just snuggly all day and that like kind of makes you feel supported and cared for? Or are you doing it because you just don't care and it doesn't matter anyway and nobody's going to see me and I'm not doing anything and I'm not even worth it to get dressed? That's the difference.
That is the difference.
Right? I mean, it's a perfect example of the circumstance being neutral. Sweatpants are neutral, right? But if you're wearing them because you feel hopeless, then that's different than if you're wearing them because you just want to feel snuggly that day. You know, that's just different. Just being aware of that. Now, the last thing I do want to talk about, because I think this is important, and this is something that I experience, and I usually realize that it's happening, but not until I'm kind of in the middle of it. And then I'm like, I'm doing it again. I'm doing it again. And I need to pull myself out of this hole. Social isolation. When you're feeling unhappy and you just want to retreat, nobody cares about me. Nobody wants to hear what I have to say. I'm not worth anybody paying any attention to me. You go down this hole of social isolation and you don't reach out to people. And so when you're not reaching out to people, people aren't interacting with you. You start to, right? So your result is you are socially isolated. Like you don't have a great network of people because you have withdrawn from that network of people. And so you start having this self-fulfilling prophecy that nobody cares about you and nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And, you know, you withdraw even more and then you have even less interaction. And so it just keeps going and going and going. Now, I do this. I know I
do.
Knows
about which she speaks.
Now I have done this without being aware that I'm doing it and just feel like, well, obviously nobody cares. Nobody's reaching out to me. Why am I always the one who has to reach out to people? Right? Why am I always the one who has to initiate? Why can't somebody call me and just see how I'm doing? Right? So these are all the thoughts that go through my head. Like, what the hell? Right?
Yeah.
So, and then you get kind of mad about it, but then you realize after a while, like you haven't really talking. You haven't really talked to anybody in a while, and you start feeling like isolated and alone, and then you start to feel even worse and you start feeling even more unhappy. Now, I used to go down this rabbit hole for long stretches at a time. And now I realize what I'm doing. So I'm on to myself. So as soon as I start feeling like that, like, you know, geez, I really haven't heard from anybody. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Right.
Where
and then I'm like, well, have I reached out to anybody either? No, I haven't. Okay. So maybe I'll do that, you know, but I'm not going to lie. It does take some, you know, turning of the Titanic, because that thought, why am I always the one that has to do that, is very strong at that point. And it takes a little bit of force for me to be like, okay, I will reach out to other people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's you have to be very aware of it, because now it's all about choices, right? So I don't want to offend anybody, but
Nope.
I know this for myself. So if I can take it, you can take it.
Right.
Trust me on that.
Exactly.
Choices that you make, and if you're choosing to not reach out to people and you're choosing to be socially isolated, then you're not going to get the support, encouragement that you need to be able to pull yourself out of that hole. So you do have to take some responsibility, right? Because that goes back to the blaming, right? Why isn't anybody reaching out to me? They should be doing this. They should be checking on me, right? You're blaming other people instead of taking responsibility for yourself. Well, I haven't reached out to them either, right? But we feel very justified in that because they're not reaching out to me. So why would I reach out to them, right? I mean, that's what we think.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's just not crazy. I didn't mean to say it that way, but it's this cycle that your brain keeps you in.
Yeah. It just keeps you in that stuck, unhappy place. Like all the things that we're talking about, you may not experience them all at once, right? There may be
Hopefully not.
gradual. There may be a couple that you're experiencing at the same time, right? But they're all connected, right? If you find yourself complaining a lot, if you find yourself socially isolated, if you find yourself blaming other people, if you find yourself like not wanting to just generally do anything, right? All of those things are going to keep you stuck in that unhappy place. And it's nobody's responsibility except for yours to pull yourself out of it. You have to be aware of that because you could go your whole life blaming other people for why you don't have the things that you want and why you haven't achieved the goals that you want to achieve, right? You can blame other people for that. It's about being aware. It's about being aware. If you're feeling unhappy, think about those things. You know, what are you thinking? What are you doing? What are those things that are keeping you in that unhappy place? And then conversely, what can you do to pull yourself out? Which is probably the opposite of what you're doing. Yeah. If you think of that Seinfeld episode, if anybody saw the Seinfeld episode where George Costanza decided to do the opposite of whatever he did in his entire life because he didn't like the way his life was going. So he declared he was just going to do the opposite of whatever his instinct was. He did the opposite and his life exploded. And he had all this crazy success. And, you know, because he decided that what he was doing was not getting him to where he wanted to be. And he just decided, I'm just going to do the opposite. So just do the opposite, people. Do the opposite. Google the episode if you haven't seen it.
I love it.
All right. That is what we have for you today. If you are unhappy, what are your thoughts? What are your actions? What can you do differently to help pull yourself out of that? So go do that this week. We will see you next week, everybody.
Next time, everyone.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. This makes it easier for everyone to find us and helps us spread our message about self-care from the inside out. Have a wonderful week, and remember, making yourself the priority is the highest form of self-care.